My friends, welcome. Today we turn to a lesson from Marcus Aurelius that feels even more urgent in our modern age than it did 2,000 years ago. It is about silence, not the empty silence of indifference, but the deliberate silence of strength. In a time when voices compete for attention, when every opinion is rushed into the air, Marcus reminds us of something countercultural, that strength often hides in restraint, that wisdom sometimes looks like saying nothing at all. Have you noticed how rarely silence is honored anymore? We rush to respond to emails, to comment online, to win arguments at the dinner table. And yet, when we look back, how many of those quick words actually mattered? How many of them brought peace, or built trust, or solved anything? More often than not, they left us with regret. How many of you have whispered to yourself after a quarrel, "If only I had stayed quiet"? Marcus himself lived surrounded by noise, the clamor of the Roman Senate, the arguments of generals, the cries of citizens. He could not escape it, but in his meditations, written in the quiet hours of the night, he recorded a different rhythm, the rhythm of patience, of deliberate pause, of silence. He wrote, "Better to trip with the feet than with the tongue." What a striking image. To stumble in walking is temporary. To stumble in speech may wound for years. I once worked with a man in his late 50s who carried a lifelong scar from words spoken in anger. He told me about an argument with his father decades ago, when he shouted words he could never take back. His father died not long after, and the silence that followed was heavier than anything he could bear. He said, "I wish I had given him silence instead of rage. That silence would have honored him more than my words ever did." Silence, then, is not nothing. It is not cowardice or absence. It is presence of a different kind, the presence of self-control. When you and I choose silence, we are not withdrawing. We are holding the line against impulse. We are guarding our peace and often protecting the dignity of those around us. Have you ever noticed that the person who can remain calm in the storm often commands more respect than the one who shouts the loudest? Imagine Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, sitting among fiery debates, betrayals, and accusations. He had the power to speak, to condemn, to destroy reputations with a single word, and yet he trained himself to pause, to hold back, to wait until wisdom rather than anger shaped his response. That is the silence I want us to explore today. As we step into this reflection, ask yourself, in your own life, where has silence already saved you? Where might it have protected you, had you chosen it? These questions are not about regret, but about learning. Because if we can learn, even now, to hold silence as Marcus did, we may find a new strength rising in us, a strength that no insult or argument can shake. In the next part, we'll look at silence not just as a shield, but as a discipline, a daily training of the soul. And we'll see why Marcus believed that the one who masters silence has already mastered himself. But before we continue, I ask you, if these reflections speak to you, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. It helps bring this ancient wisdom to more people who may be searching for peace in a noisy world. And tell me in the comments, have you ever experienced a moment when silence changed everything for you? Let us continue. Marcus Aurelius did not see silence as mere avoidance. For him, it was a discipline, a daily training. He knew that every word an emperor spoke could shape the destiny of thousands. Rash speech could ruin reputations, stir unrest, even ignite wars. That is why he wrote to himself, again and again, reminders to hold back, to choose stillness before speech. For you and me, the stakes may not be imperial, but the principle is the same. In our homes, in our friendships, in the workplace, words carry power. A single harsh sentence can linger for years. That is why silence must be practiced like a craft. It is not something we call upon only in great moments. It is something we rehearse in the small ones. Think of the moments when silence is hardest, when someone cuts you off in traffic, when a friend forgets your kindness, when your spouse makes an unfair remark. The impulse is to strike back, to defend, to argue, to correct. But Marcus would urge us to pause. He would say, "You are not a slave to your anger. You are not compelled to reply." And in that pause lies freedom. I remember a colleague who survived years of workplace conflict, not by fighting every battle, but by refusing to feed the flames. She told me once, "The sharpest sword I carried was my silence." When others spread gossip, she offered no reply. When provoked, she responded only with calm presence. Over time, her quiet dignity outlasted the noise of her rivals. Her story is a living commentary on Marcus's wisdom. The one who disciplines the tongue disciplines the soul. Modern science confirms what the Stoics intuited. Neuroscience tells us that the first surge of anger, the first impulse to react, comes from the amygdala, the primitive part of the brain. But when we hold silence for even a few seconds, the rational prefrontal cortex comes online. Silence literally gives the mind time to choose. It is not just philosophy, it is biology. Picture yourself standing in a storm. The wind howls, branches whip, voices rise. Everything urges you to move, to shout, to fight back. But at the center of the storm, there is stillness, the calm eye where nothing rages. That calm is what silence trains us to carry within. You cannot stop storms from coming, but you can carry silence as your shelter. This discipline is not easy. It requires practice, failure, and starting again. But with time, silence becomes a habit, and that habit becomes strength. You find yourself less rattled by insults, less enslaved to your pride, less anxious to prove your point. You begin to discover what Marcus knew. The most powerful person is not the one who conquers others with words, but the one who conquers himself with restraint. Let me ask you, where in your life do you feel most tempted to speak too quickly? And what would happen if, just once, you let silence hold that space? These are not small experiments. They are daily exercises in freedom. In our final part, we will go deeper still. We will see how silence is not only a shield and not only a discipline, but also a gift, something we offer to others, and something we must offer to ourselves. Silence, Marcus Aurelius reminds us, is not simply the absence of words. It is the active presence of strength. In his meditations, he wrote, "The best answer to anger is silence." Not because silence avoids conflict, but because it denies anger the power to rule over you. Imagine standing in the middle of a storm. The wind howls, the rain lashes, the thunder roars. You could scream back at the storm, but would it listen? Would your voice silence the thunder? Of course not. The wiser choice is to stand still, secure, letting the storm pass while your foundation remains unshaken. Silence is that foundation. It is not weakness. It is sovereignty over yourself. Modern life is louder than Rome ever was. Every notification, every opinion online, every argument on TV is a new storm vying for your attention. And in this endless noise, many confuse speaking constantly with being strong. But Marcus teaches us the opposite. The one who can remain quiet, thoughtful, measured, is the one who cannot be provoked, cannot be swayed, cannot be broken. Silence becomes a fortress of character. This does not mean we never speak. It means that when we do speak, our words carry weight. Think of a hammer. If it strikes endlessly, its blows lose meaning. But if it strikes only when needed, it can shape stone. Your silence is the pause that sharpens your voice. Ask yourself, how many arguments in your past could have been softened or avoided if you had chosen silence first? How many wounds in relationships came not from action, but from words spoken too quickly, too harshly, too unguarded? Silence saves you from regret. It allows you to measure what truly needs to be said and what is better left unspoken. And yet, silence is more than a shield. It is also a tool of transformation. In silence, you hear your own thoughts more clearly. You see the patterns of your desires, your fears, your judgments. Marcus Aurelius would sit in his tent, away from his generals, away from the senators, and write, not for the world, not for glory, but for himself. Those writings, born in silence, became one of the most enduring works of philosophy ever written. So I ask you, what would your silence create if you allowed yourself the space? Could you heal? Could you grow? Could you learn to see the world not through the haze of noise, but with clarity? My friends, silence is not escape. It is engagement with life at the deepest level. It is where wisdom begins, where strength matures, where peace is found. To follow Marcus Aurelius is to remember that silence is not the absence of strength, but its purest form. If these reflections speak to you, let's carry this wisdom together. Like this video if it resonated, subscribe to join our community of seekers, and share your thoughts in the comments. When was silence your greatest source of strength?